April is the cruelest month, but at least it's gone for now. May, however, brings more jihad. They want to kill us all somehow. So be forewarned and be aware, and don't listen to Hamas linked care. Get your kids out of UCLA. Hamas has taken over there. But not here, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. David Wood is here with us with another thrilling episode of This Week in Jihad. Get your leather straps open and ready. David, hello. There is more jihad for us this week, I'm afraid.
That's hard to believe, Robert.
It is. And the big thing is it's happening on college and university campuses everywhere. It is a lot of self-righteous leftists and Muslim students thinking they are on the side of goodness and righteousness as they set up what Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, aka Uncle Fester, but actually he said this was good. He said, I just don't see what living in pup tents for Hamas is going to accomplish. And I thought, well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Pup tents for Hamas. That's what we're looking at. And so we can get right to it. We have at Harvard and at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, they actually replaced American flags with Palestinian flags on the campus flagpoles. City College, too, in New York City, these were all taken down, but at UCLA, Jewish students were barred from campus, and the one of the parents called up and said, my child can't get to class, and they said, yeah, the officials are allowing this, and you can see in video that a cop is right there, and he just doesn't let the kid on campus, doesn't let him go to class. Meanwhile, we have all kinds of outstanding individuals of great character supporting pup tents for Hamas. This is Mumia Abu Jamal. I don't know if you remember him, young fella.
Looks familiar.
Wait,
is that the guy who rammed into people or something?
No, this is not the guy who rammed into people anytime recently. He's in prison, and he is a cop killer. He killed some cops in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia years ago. When I was in college, the big cause was Free Mumia, because he had supposedly murdered Philadelphia police officer Daniel Faulkner in a just murder. And so, in any case, he was the big cause celeb. But he never did get freed. He's still in prison. You can see he's in prison in this photo. And he actually called up one of the encampments the one at City University of New York, CUNY, to express his support. And so once again, we have the leftist Islamic Alliance. Here also is Kaimani James, and you probably saw him.
He's one of the definitions of mess around, find out.
Yes, Kaimani James. Although, actually, the funny thing about Kaimani James, for those who don't know, he was the leader of the Columbia University encampment, and he said that he wanted to kill Zionists, that Zionists did not deserve to live, and that we should count ourselves lucky that he was not out there killing Zionists. And so he was expelled from the university when his video became viral. But what's interesting about it is that he actually said this in a meeting with university officials in January, and they did nothing at the time. It was only when it became a viral thing that he suddenly got expelled. Anyway, David, yes.
Now he's gonna have to join Ilhan Omar's daughter in trying to figure out how to find food.
Yes, and I'm trying to figure out how this thing works even still. You are on the screen,
Welcome,
and now.
welcome to the David Wood Show, ladies and gentlemen.
Now, how did that happen? I was trying to fix my name, which was in the center, and somebody said your name is in the center, and I thought you're right. It's moved over, and now I'm moved
People,
over.
people know who we are now. You have no name, and I have a name. People know who I am.
How the heck? My
Supposed to
goodness.
figure this stuff out before you do, before you start the show, not in the middle of the show. You're good. We don't need any names. Matter of
Yeah,
fact,
except
I would take your name off this show just because you don't want people to know how much you're messing up right now. You don't want them to
yes,
know you by name.
that must be it. Here we go. Look at that. Oh.
Burn.
All right. How can I move it back? I'm used to being on the left. This is very
Uh, I
strange.
think I think just click on yourself first.
Okay, click on me,
Uh-huh.
and
No,
then
that's me.
but I clicked on me, and that's what happened.
Okay, there you now
There we
hit there you
go.
there you go.
Okay. Oh, and look at that! I even got the name
There
back.
we go, ladies and gentlemen. You see, running a tight ship here, ladies and gentlemen, a
Okay.
tight ship.
You guys need any technical help? Just call me.
Hmm.
All right. We got a lot of jihad, David. So I got
Really?
to stop here fooling around. Yeah, there's been all kinds of jihad. Story out of Hamas, out of Gaza. Tariq Abu Erar, who is a Bedouin doctor from the village of Ararat on Nakab in the Negev. So he is an Israeli Arab, a Muslim who lives in Israel, and uh, he was telling the story that on October 7th he was driving along as at the scene of the attacks, of course not knowing, and he saw a wounded man on the side of the road. He thought, "Oh, there's been a car accident." And so he stopped, and he ends up getting shot in the chest and the leg, surrounded by Hamas. They capture him, they tie him to a pole, they ask him who he is, where he's from, where he's going, and then they say, "Tell me this verse from the Quran and that verse from the Quran. And who are the people of the Prophet Muhammad?" Things like that. And when he answers, because he's a Muslim and he knows, then they yell at him for working with the Jews, but they let him go. Now, why did they let him go if he knew Quran? What does that have to do with this political conflict?
Yeah, and we've heard that before, right? I think it was the mall attack in Kenya, and the jihadis are actually going around to people because once you find out you're being attacked, everyone sort of spreads around. Okay, just say you're Muslim, say you're Muslim, say you're Muslim when they ask. And so, but they had a little quiz for people. They had a little
Mm-hmm.
quiz. So hey, recite the Shahada in Arabic, and they'd have some of the little trivia questions to find out if you're really a Muslim, and if you're really a Muslim, then they wouldn't kill you. But yeah, it is very strange if this is just a political conflict, and that person was on the Israel side of the conflict. Why wouldn't they have the same problem with him?
Exactly.
It's almost like they view it as religious in nature.
Yeah, you somehow you would get that idea. You know, it's amazing. This has actually happened quite a bit. As you noted, the Westgate Mall in Nairobi in 2013, uh, they were quizzing people about Islam, and those who couldn't answer questions would get killed, but those who were able to answer the questions would be spared. But this also happened in St. Cloud, Minnesota, David. The Variety Vacation Land, St. Cloud, Minnesota, 2016. Dahir Adan, a Somali migrant, he was stopping people in the mall and asking them if they were Muslim or Christian, and he was stabbing the non Muslims. This has also happened. I got a big list here at Jihad Watch, jihadwatch.org, ladies and gentlemen. This has happened in Nigeria, Burkina Faso, the Philippines, Mali, where else? Several times in Kenya, Bangladesh, Mozambique, and elsewhere. And every time, all of those, I'm referring to incidents in which the attackers asked the victims if they were Muslim or Christian, or gave them a quiz, and those who could answer the Muslim questions were freed, and those who could not were killed or kidnapped. So that is a very clear indication of the religious nature of the conflict. Also, we had
And it's interesting because it's all around the world, right? How do jihadis from all around the world get the exact same idea about this, right?
mhm,
That hey, we're
that's a
about to do this attack, or they all get the same idea. It's just like jihad in general, because and we've talked about this in the past, but when you have a terrorist attack, fortunately people are catching on by now. But for years, whenever there was a terrorist attack, people would say, but look at Westboro Baptist Church, as if Westboro Baptist Church is going around slaughtering people. But it's they were doing some messed up stuff. But notice that was like that stuff was kind of exclusive to that church. You didn't see the same thing popping up all over the world among Christians. You didn't have it. So it's interesting that any Christian group that goes off the deep end somehow, they're kind of on their own. You don't see it happening over and over again. Whereas when it comes to jihad, you had people from around the world. Even if you had a population that's mostly peaceful Muslims working, minding their own business, and so on, there always emerges from in there a call to jihad, a call to terror, and so on. So it's just weird that if Islam actually is a religion of peace and tolerance and doesn't teach these things, how do people from around the world get the exact same misunderstanding of Islam? That was the question. We never got our answer, Robert. We never found out how all these people from around the world came to the exact same misunderstanding of their religion.
oddly enough, yes. Somehow we never did get that answer, but that's an excellent point, David. On the other side, that so often, if I had a nickel for all the times that some Islamic apologist or some leftist has said to me, well, what about the Westboro Baptist Church? Or what about the Ku Klux Klan, who were all devout Christians, which of course they weren't, but that's the claim. Now, the Klan and the Westboro Baptist Church, they don't have anything in common. The Klan is all about race and various political issues. And the Westboro Baptist Church was all about homosexuals and things like that. And so they didn't have anything in common. If you were saying that's some kind of real Christianity, then you would expect that there would be a longer, larger tradition that would agree that this was a valid perspective. But instead, you have two completely different and wholly eccentric views of Christianity. One of them hardly Christian at all in any sense. And then on the other side, you have this remarkable unanimity across nations, across cultures, across centuries of Islamic jihadis. And yet, most people in the West still have the idea that the people who are jihadis are misunderstanding Islam. And so we had a tourist go to Israel. And I just don't know, David, if I were an Israeli official right now, I don't know if I'd be saying, yeah, tourists, come on in from Turkey and from other places that are actively hostile to Israel. This Turk in Israel, the Turkish tourist, he stabbed a police officer in Jerusalem. He was identified as Hassan Skalanan, who arrived with a knife and started to stab Border Patrol officers. Now, can you explain what Turkey has to do with this conflict, David?
No.
Indeed, and that's the question
About
there.
about as much as Columbia University has to do with this conflict.
That's indeed so, sir. And so you gotta wonder, though. The UCLA is really out of hand. And David, I'm supposed to go speak at UCLA in a couple weeks, and I don't
Yeah,
know if it's going.
I saw your tweet about that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to happen. And I certainly, I look forward to it with all the enthusiasm of root canal. But it is the kids who invited me. They have to live with it, and I'm certainly not going to turn them down after they invite me. But people are getting beat up. Pro-Israel students getting chased and beaten on the university campuses, on the UCLA campus, and it's just astonishing. The administration's they're sympathetic, of course, to the demonstrators, so they're letting all this happen.
Yeah, and think about all the various ways this is insane. I mean, on the one hand, which we already brought up with the Fetterman quote, um, but I mean, like, what do these guys think they're doing? Like, do they seriously think Israel's going to be like, oh, well, we were going to continue crushing Hamas, but since this is going on intense outside Columbia University, we're going to rethink this. In other words, how many actual Gazans are being helped by any of this? If you want to help the people of Gaza, quit giving them the impression that there's so much global support that they can actually win.
That's a very good point.
The message you should send is you're totally outmatched. Stop launching terrorist attacks and getting crushed in response. Stop it. That's the message that should be coming. When you cheer them on, you're giving them the impression that they should go on, keep fighting. So, that's stupid. They're not helping the people of Gaza. They're helping get them killed over time. They're helping continue the cycle. So there's that issue. There's the complete hypocrisy, which we've talked about before, that for decades we've been told after every single Islamic terrorist attack, hey, but don't associate that with other Muslims. Other Muslims didn't do that. So don't blame these Muslims over here for what these Muslims over there are doing. And yet here we find out, no, if there's a conflict on the other side of the world, you go target any random Jew or anyone who would associate with a Jew or anyone who sides with a Jew or something like that. Just go after everyone in general, indiscriminately. And so massive dose of hypocrisy right there. And then finally, the cherry on top of the ice cream sundae, they're proving the case. They're proving the case that Israel needs its own place, right? Mm-hmm. Everywhere else in the world, apparently, you could just flip a switch and people decide that they have to go after Jews. Okay, well, if anyone in any country at any time can just flip a switch and go and decide we have to destroy Jews, it kind of seems like Jews need their own place. And so these kids are making an airtight case for why Israel needs to exist.
That's an excellent point as well. And it brings us to an interesting question, though. There was an imam in Florida. And once again, this is like we had last week or a couple weeks ago, I don't remember, but recently, a guy who was not named. And a lot of these mosques, they put the sermons up, the Friday sermons up on their page, their Facebook page or whatever, and they don't name who the guy is speaking. And so if he's not prominent, then a lot of the people don't know who they are. So this guy, and here he is one of them, but he was speaking, as you can see, at Masjid Al-Iman in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And he was speaking about why the Jews behave in this way. He said, we will mention what the Jews believe, because you wonder, how come? Why are they such a breed of human beings? And that was actually, he showed that he was a moderate, David, in saying they were human beings instead of apes and pigs. Mm-hmm. But
progress.
Yes.
Literal.
I wonder if they came up to him after and said, brother, you are contravening the Quran. Anyway, he says it is simply because they are indoctrinated that way. That is their creed. And I thought, okay, now we're getting into projection territory. And he says, I will give you proof from two passages from the Talmud which is one of the books that the Zionists refer to. Allah created the foreigner, the non-Jew, listen to this, in human form, so that they would be suitable to serve the Jews. This message goes to those who bow from amongst this Islamic nation, to the Zionists, to the Jews. This is how they look at you. This is how they see you, as an animal that is in the form of a human being, created
Wow.
just to serve them.
Wow.
Yes.
Pot, meat, kettle.
Exactly. The Talmud actually does not. Actually, the Talmud specifically does say that the non-Jews are human beings. It is false to say that the Talmud says that the non-Jews are animals who are going to be slaves of the Muslims. I actually spent a lot of hours tracking this down because I'm writing a book right now about anti-Semitism. So when this sermon came to my attention, I went looking and I found this quote, when the Messiah comes, every Jew will have 2,800 Gentile slaves. And there are a lot of those lists of Talmud quotes that has this on there. And it says it's from Simeon Hadarsen, folio 56D. Now, the unfortunate, well, actually the fortunate fact here is that this is not what the Talmud actually says. There is no Simeon Hadarsen folio 56D, and there is no such quote. And there are many quotes where it says, for example, a Gentile can own land in the land of Israel so fully as to have the right of digging in it in pits, ditches, ditches, and caves. For it says, the heavens are the heavens of the Lord, but the earth he gave to the sons of man, which obviously is including the Gentiles among the sons of men, that is, human beings. So it's just a lie, but tell us what you mean by pot, meat, kettle. What is this guy, what is the elephant in the room, or one of them, that this guy is ignoring?
Well, you have the Quran calling Jews and Christians, Surah 98, verse 6, the worst of creatures. You have these passages about Allah transforming Jews into animals and so on as punishment. But, I mean, we're supposed to be subjugated. We're supposed to be second-class citizens paying money to Muslims to acknowledge our inferior status. And so we're the worst of creatures. So we're actually lower than pigs or dogs or something like that. But the Quran says, this is Surah 3, verse 110, that Muslims are the best of peoples ever raised up for mankind. So Muslims are the best of peoples. Jews and Christians were the worst of creatures. We have to be subjugated. And the only way we can have a right to continue existing as Jews and Christians is to pay tribute money acknowledging our inferior status. It sounds like this guy is saying, you see, this is what Jews believe. This is why they're evil. I'm like, wait, that's exactly what you believe, dude.
Indeed. And so he goes on, and he said, after he gives us the Talmud, or what he claims to be the Talmud, then he says that he makes a little joke here. Says, now you wonder why they go. They fly from Brooklyn, from under the tunnels. There is an airline that goes underground. But then he says, I'm joking. And I'll tell you something, David, if he hadn't said I'm joking, I would have thought, oh, he actually believes this. Because, after all, these are the people who have given us stories about the Zionist sharks and Zionist squirrels spying on the Muslims. So, you never know. But anyway, he says they go from under tunnels straight to Palestine to do what? To steal the land. Why? Because for them it is permissible to steal from someone who is not a Jew, which is also false. Throughout history you will find that Jews orchestrated everything against Muslims. But who executed? The Christians. So he's saying the Jews stirred up all the trouble against the Muslims, and the Christians carried out what the Jews bade them to do. And get this, then he goes on to say, who are those with whom Allah is upset or angry with? The Jews.
Hey.
Yeah. Followed by whom? The misguided ones. And those are who? The Christians. Because they always follow them. Don't go too far. Right here in the country where we live, look at what the Zionist Christians are doing. Look how many bills they have no problem passing against their own people because they follow the Jews, despite the Christians' belief that the Jews are the ones who killed Jesus. So, what do you think? What is he talking about here? The Jews are the ones with whom Allah is angry and the Christians are misguided. He must be an
Well,
extremist.
well, that's what Muslims pray every single day. What is it? 17 times a day they quote Surat Al-Fatiha, and we have the commentaries. We know what it means according to Muhammad and his companions when they're praying to not be like those on whom is Allah's wrath or those who were led astray. They're talking about Jews and Christians, and of course the most insane part in all of that is that when churches have these interfaith events and they try to show how tolerant they are by having Muslims come in and the Muslims lead the Christians in prayer and say, "Hey, here's a prayer that we can all pray. Well, let's teach you how to pray it." And then the Christians pray along with the Muslims and recite this, and they don't even realize they're cursing themselves.
Yep, it's incredible. But of course, ignorance is the order of the day, and we live in an age of absurdity. So, what are you going to do? All right, let's go to some other incidents. We had in Iraq, we had a TikTok star, Gufran Sawadi, better known as Fahad. And there she is, Fahad. And she was actually killed. She was sentenced to prison a few years back for violating public decency and morals, because it seems that on her TikTok channel or whatever they have there, she would share videos of herself dancing to pop music in form-fitting clothes. In the past, these videos were deemed inappropriate by Iraq's judiciary. Sawadi was sentenced to 6 months in prison for the crime of producing and publishing several films and videos containing obscene and indecent language, violating public decency and morals. So, she was just shot dead on the street outside of her home in Baghdad. David, to deplore that would be to endorse violating public decency and morals, would it not?
Yep.
Well, that is the
welcome
yes.
to Iran.
That is the idea. That, I mean, that is the response that you would get from an Islamic apologist. That
Sure.
if you say this is terrible that she was killed, then they say, oh, you want women to be prancing around in form-fitting clothes and enticing men.
That is the Daniel Hakikachu response.
Yes, precisely. So it's important to note, I think, in the face of that kind of thing, that we can not be in favor of any kind of immorality while at the same time not being in favor of murder on the street of a woman whose morals differ from what we think they ought to be.
Yeah, it's interesting in Islam for the Dawah guys. It's always you have to go on a killing spree, or there can't be any rules at all. So
Yes.
it's complete, total chaos and anarchy, or we have to go on killing sprees. So
Well, that makes sense.
What's your choice? There's no
Yep.
middle ground. There's no middle ground.
That's it. Oh, here is something I wanted to make sure to get to. This is aerial photos of an area in Artsakh, that is Nagorno-Karabakh, and that is the area in Azerbaijan that from time immemorial has been Armenian land, with churches going back to the 4th century. But the Armenians were forcibly evicted last fall, and now we see the result of that. That on the left, we see this area of Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh last year, and the identical area now. And you see it's been leveled. There's nothing there now. And this is because, well, why is it, David? What's going on?
Looks like they're being wiped out.
Indeed. And this is what happens. This, if you want to know what happened in the Islamic world to create the Islamic world, what happened to the Christians of North Africa, the land of Augustine of Hippo and Cyprian of Carthage, and so on. If you want to know what happened to the Christians of Egypt, the Christians all over the Middle East, this is the kind of thing that happened. They would be driven out of an area, and the area would be leveled, and then later it'll be built up again, and there will be no trace that there had previously been a Christian presence. I remember, my own family was exiled from the Ottoman Empire as it was collapsing about 100 years ago, and I read a book some years ago about a woman who had exactly the same experience, and her grandparents were exiled as well, but she actually took her grandmother back to Turkey, I believe in the late 90s, and they went around to the town where she had grown up and asked, where are the Christians' houses? Where are the houses where the Christians used to live? And the Turks who lived there said, no Christians ever lived here. And the whole thing had been completely erased. So we have this happening right now in Nagorno-Karabakh. People don't even realize. And this is what the Gazans and the Palestinians in general would want to do to Israel if they get the chance.
Well, it's just good that we have all these college students protesting what's happening to the Christians.
Yes, yes. It's a good thing we have their tremendous moral compass.
Hmm.
So
Perfectly functioning moral compass.
perfectly functioning. So let's see here. I got signs from George Washington University. There it is. This is a sign that's posted at the encampment at three signs posted at the encampment at George Washington University. We got your standard issue Free Palestine, but also handwritten signs. Students will leave when Israelis leave. So they're saying we want Israel destroyed or we're staying here. And students will go back home when Israelis go back to Europe, US, etc. Their real homes. Well, that would solve it, wouldn't it, David?
Yeah, sure would. Yeah, me and AP have been talking about this. People don't realize like how big a deal this is. If Muslims were to win, if groups like Hamas were to actually win, if all the whining and tantrums on college campuses were to actually be effective, and somehow Israel just got wiped out. My goodness, I think you'd almost instantly have the revival of the Islamic Caliphate and so on, because they would take this as a sign that Allah is with the Muslims to take over the world again. And I think you would have jihad in every single direction. So people don't understand like how dangerous this stuff is, and it's actually really good for the world that Muslims keep losing to jihadis. You want the doubt to always be there. Is Allah really on our side as we try to subjugate the world? Do we really have the Almighty helping us in this war when we can't beat this one tiny little nation here? But yeah, it's I mean, you're talking United States college campuses. Israel needs to be wiped out, and they need to go back to all the places where they came from, because yeah, they're from Europe.
Yeah, they don't ever mention that there were 900,000 Mizrahi Jews from North Africa, from Yemen, from all over the place in what is known as the Islamic world today, who were exiled from those lands that they had lived in from time immemorial for 1940 they were exiled in 1948 because of the creation of the state of Israel. And so Israel has a very large population of Middle Eastern Jews, and nobody ever talks about their right of return or anything of that kind.
No student marches for that.
Nope, not a bit. Not a one. Hey, David, I got a good news story here. This
That's good.
This
Nice for a
is
change.
yes.
The
This is out
Robert,
of
change it to This Week in Good News.
yeah. Well, maybe that's what I'll make the Shadow Channel to get around all the YouTube
Uh-huh. This Week in Good News.
shenanigans.
There you go. Yeah,
Yeah,
call it This Week in Good News.
that's great. It'll feature stories like this. This is from the Birmingham Mail in Birmingham, England, and it's the story of a woman named Fatima, and she got her car broken into, and 25 pounds in cash. Wonder how much that weighs. 25 pounds in cash and her son's Nike sports bag were taken. And of course, the window was smashed and the car was trashed. But she had several Islamic books, Qaidas. Those are that means base, just like it does for Al Qaeda, but it doesn't have to do with terrorism. It has to do with learning the Arabic alphabet and Quranic grammar so you can read the Quran. And they respectfully put her Qaidas on the dashboard very neatly as they trashed the rest of the car. And so this was presented as a heartwarming story in the Birmingham Mail, as in, you see, even the thieves respect Islam. And I think the subtext there is that the Birmingham paper is saying you all have to fall in line and respect Islam. See, even the thieves are doing it, and you have to you have to go along. You have to fall into line here. She says they still have respect for the Quran, so there is still goodness in the world. Isn't that
That
heartwarming?
is. That is. My heart just melted. And I want to be more respectful of Islam now because I can be like those thieves.
Yep, that's it. Meanwhile, also out of England, we had these upstanding gentlemen, and you can see that they are all Muslims in the picture. Zafar Iqbal, Nasar Iqbal, Mohammed Chothia, Bilal Patel, as if Ali, and anyway, the rest of them. But the these guys got 346 years in prison for their operations of a Muslim rape gang. And the upshot is that the rape gang operated, David, from 1999 to 2012. So for 13 years, those guys were preying upon girls in the North Kirklees area of West Yorkshire. And they engaged in behavior that was called by the court abhorrent in the extreme, including rape, sexual abuse, and trafficking. And they treated their victims in an unbelievably callous and degrading way. But David, 13 years they did this. And
Mm-hmm.
here it is, 12 years later, and they are finally sentenced. Why on earth is the British justice system so slow in moving on these cases?
They've been conditioned that any time you're dealing with Muslims or Islam or whatever, it's you're on very dangerous ground of being an Islamophobe and a bigot and so on, and that's why everyone is scared to. Everyone is until it became a big story, which it only became a big story because people like Tommy Robinson and other people were drawing attention to it, but the media wouldn't touch it, police wouldn't touch it, social workers, prosecutors, they wouldn't go near it. They were all absolutely terrified of being called Islamophobes. So they were so terrified of being called Islamophobes that they're basically sacrificing little girls on this altar of false tolerance and so on. As pagan as the pagans of old who would sacrifice their daughters. And so that's it just people don't realize how messed up this is because you look at organizations like CARE, where anytime we point out any connection between what happens in the world and Muhammad's teachings, what do? Islamophobes, look at the Islamophobes. Islamophobia is everywhere. And so what are they doing? They're trying to condition people to look the other way whenever Islam is doing something. And they're they're looking for the exact same result that we see in European countries, where no one is willing to address these issues because they're all terrified of being called a name.
Hmm.
It's pathetic. It's
And
pathetic.
that's
It's
just what
pathetic, people.
happened. You know, you mentioned Tommy Robinson, and it's important to note that groups like Hope Not Hate and Tell Mama, leftist groups, they began to demonize Tommy Robinson and stigmatize him and call him an Islamophobe and a racist and all that stuff, all the usual nonsense, because he was talking about the Muslim rape gangs. And it was back a few years ago. I remember going onto the Hope Not Hate website and finding all these articles where they were calling Tommy Robinson a racist because he was talking about Muslim rape gangs. And then when it became unmistakable, they scrubbed all those articles. But nonetheless, they are largely responsible for the British authorities' singular failure in this regard. And meanwhile, they're trying to
Yeah,
do.
and
Yeah.
oh, I just wanted to say another terrible part of this story is here in the U.S. Here in the U.S., the sort of bottom of the barrel in prison, snitches and guys who mess with kids, guys who do something with kids. That's bottom of the barrel. You're in a lot of trouble. You go into prison for doing something with a 12-year-old. But in the UK, you enter the prison as heroes because they're so filled with Muslims now who are all in there for doing the same thing. And it's a good thing in Islam. It's a good thing that you are degrading these little 11 and 12-year-old girls like that. And so you actually go into prison in the UK, you have the full protection of the Muslim community, which functions as a big gang in prison, and totally different environment. You can, so it's just a weird situation because to this day, because of my background, whenever I see pictures of guys who are going to prison for drugging, raping, gang raping, pimping an 11 or 12-year-old girl, I think, oh yeah, those guys are about to get the crap beat out of them in prison. I think, wait, no, it's the UK. They're not. They're going to be heroes. They're going to get a couple years of prison dawa. That's what they're going to get.
Incredible. Incredible. And anyway, the segue here is to Australia, where they're trying to make the same thing, the same situation come about. These cheerful folks are Muslim leaders in Australia. And you know, of course, David, all about Marmari Emanuel and the stabbing attack upon him, and how young Muslims who were apparently involved in planning the stabbing of Marmari Emanuel were also planning to attack Jews in Australia, and that the teenage Muslim who did stab Marmari Emanuel said that he was talking about his prophet, and when he brought his prophet into it, then he had to act, and he was also saying Allahu Akbar and so on. Okay, so these Muslim leaders in Australia, they had a press conference, and they said that they demanded an end to the classification in Australia's terrorism laws about religiously motivated terrorism. And they said it was important to avoid simplistic attributions that target specific communities. The presumption that terrorism is inherently tied to religion is not only inaccurate, but harmful. This misconception persists despite extensive scholarly work demonstrating that terrorism is driven by political and ideological motives, not religious faith. And they look serious about it. So what do you think? They should stop talking about religiously motivated terrorism, am I right?
Yeah. And we just talked earlier, completely different context, about how does the same thing keep arising everywhere. Great Britain, what happens? Muslims doing horrible things and using this Islamophobia card to silence the critics. What's happening in America? Council on American Islamic Relations, other groups, anytime there's a terrorist attack, anything else going on, we're supposed to keep quiet about it, keep our mouths shut. Australia, exact same thing. Why? I mean, seriously, guys, if Muslims are doing horrible things and quoting the Quran and quoting the Hadith to justify what they're doing, how can you say with a straight face, but shut up about it? We're already your dhimmis or something like that. But it's sick. I mean, think about this, Robert. If if Christians were doing horrible things, I would want it addressed a lot. I would want a spotlight on it so that problem can be dealt with. It wouldn't cross my mind, oh, Christians are doing, let's all keep it quiet. Let's keep it quiet. We need to silence the people. We need to silence the people who are reporting what's happening. We don't need to stop what's actually going on. That's a sick mentality. That's a sick mentality. So I regard these people as like evil, completely evil. If you're trying to silence critics who are drawing attention to some really, really messed up things. And I mean, think about what kind of issue this is. You had a 16-year-old walk up and try to murder a bishop in a church service because that bishop pretty regularly criticizes Islam. And then when they go and look on his devices, they find out that there's a bunch of teens and they're trying to get guns so they can go slaughter Jews in the name of Allah. And they're saying they're seeking martyrdom. They're seeking Islamic martyrdom. And what are these Muslims saying? They're saying, keep quiet about it. Do not look into this because you can't even talk about it, because if you do and you just read the messages of these guys, you see how this is all about Islam and spreading Islam and martyrdom for Allah and so on. So you can't even read any of these stories. So what do these guys say? They're saying just shut up about it. If you have an epidemic of teenagers wanting to slaughter unbelievers to become martyrs, because that's what the Dawa guys are training them to do, shut up about it. Shut up about the grooming gangs. Shut up about the terrorism. Shut up about what's happening with all these kids. This is sick. This is sick, evil stuff.
Yeah, because the upshot is, the subtext is, they're really in favor of jihad attacks. They really want more jihad violence. And so they don't want the Australian non-Muslims to realize what's being said, what's being done, or why it's being done. Or if they do realize, like you say, they want them to shut up about it. They want them to be very afraid to identify the real causes. Okay, I got another strange story here, David. This is Dubai. And as you can see, it was flooded. There were some very severe floods in Dubai. This is actually a pretty mild picture of the floods. There were pictures of guys walking around, going down the street in canoes, and I saw one, apparently a rich man. I should have gotten that one. Did you see the video of the guy, some rich sheikh in Dubai, and he's standing on a table? And the video starts, you don't know why he's standing on a table in the middle of the flood water. But there's a servant standing there knee deep in the water, and you notice there's another table behind him, and the servant goes and gets the table behind him and puts him in front of him, and the guy takes a step to the table in front, and then he stands there and waits again, and he takes the table that's behind now and puts it in front again, and so he's walking down the street having this servant move the table so he keeps his feet dry. But anyway,
Must be nice.
In Dubai, why did it flood? Obviously, Allah is displeased, because in the Quran, David, in Judaism and Christianity, there is a great large strain of thought about why do the wicked prosper. You can read the Old Testament and the New Testament, and there are all kinds of passages about the good guys not winning, and the cross before the resurrection, and the evil prospering. But in Islam, there's nothing like that, because the Battle of Badr gave rise to a great many Quran verses saying, if you obey Allah, you will prosper. You will do well in this world and in the next. And the unbelievers will do badly in this world and in the next. Now, of course, that's not how the world works, because Islam is not true. But that's what the Quran says and what Islam teaches. So they got to have an explanation for the flood. The explanation that's been circulating is that the UAE approved the building of a Hindu temple, and so Allah sent them floods. What do you think?
Yeah, as soon as you started talking about the flooding, I was like, how are they going to explain it? It's going to be, oh no, they allowed this or that immorality, or they allowed alcohol or something like that. But yeah, Hindu temple, that'll work. That'll work.
So what was great about this was that a lot of people were saying, look, we got all these deserts that are majority Muslim. Build a couple Hindu temples and it'll start raining.
That's fun. That's a good
But
one.
anyway, I don't know that they're going to take that advice. In France, we had the ex-wife of an Islamic State leader. And let's see, Sonia M. They don't give the surnames, but that's sort of sort of unnecessary in this case because she's identified as the ex-wife of a top ISIS official, Abdel Nasser Ben Yusuf. And she was charged with genocide and crimes against humanity. And this was because of a Yazidi slave girl that she and Abdel Nasser had in their apartment in Raqqa. And she was 16 when she was enslaved by Abdel Nasser Ben Yusuf. And the girl now accuses Sonia of rape and saying she knew that her husband was raping her and that she was completely enslaved, not allowed to eat, drink, or even shower without informing Sonia M, getting permission, and so on. This is just these people. They have nothing to do with Islam, right? They're violating Islam, aren't they?
Yeah, you wouldn't see anything like that from Muhammad or in the Quran. Nothing
Is
about
it, Muhammad
nothing about anything like that.
behaved completely uprightly toward women, did he not? Especially non-Muslim women.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he would never he would never have a woman's husband tortured and killed and then take the woman for himself, or have a sex slave or any of that stuff, or bang a little girl. None of that.
Right, right. Those things are things that Islamophobes made up about the Islamic texts
Yeah.
about Muhammad, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you did that. You built a time machine powered by 1.21 gigawatts of Islamophobia. You went back in time and wrote all this stuff in their sources. You know it.
Yep, I still have the empty cans of Islamophobia in my
Jews,
garage.
the Jews made you a time machine.
That's right. They did. They did. I had to go all the way to Tel Aviv to get it. But anyway, that is the story. It's interesting to note that while this woman is on trial in France, and that's good, and she will probably do some time, and that's fine. The thing is that you can just be 100% certain that the French court did not mention, or didn't even come close to mentioning, why they thought this was a good idea. Why she and her husband thought they could do this. Why they thought they were justified in this behavior. And so it's just going to keep on going. You know, as long as there are Muslims, there will be jihad, and as long as there's jihad, then there will be slaves, and this kind of phenomenon will happen, and yet nobody in the West wants to face it. All right, in Germany, they had a parade, 1,000 Muslims, and they were screaming Allahu Akbar, of all things. And they were demonstrating in favor of establishing a caliphate. They were saying caliphate is the solution. Kalifat ist die Lösung. And
Wir wollen ein Kalifat.
yeah, yeah.
Did you watch that footage? Did you watch that footage?
Yeah, some of it.
It sounded exactly like a Nazi rally.
I did think
Guy sitting
that.
there, Hey, Allahu Akbar!
You can see why Adolf loved those guys. You know, they were
Yeah,
after his own
yeah,
heart.
absolutely.
Oh
It
yeah.
was interesting because Elon Musk retweeted that. So Visegrad 24, that channel, posted the footage of the
Hmm.
German rally, and then Elon shared it and said, "Surely this has to calling for the overthrow of the government has to be illegal, isn't it?"
Well, one would
So that's
think, but it seems like all bets are off when it comes to Muslims. It's just like
yeah, it would be
polygamy.
Islamophobic.
Polygamy is illegal in Germany, and yet they actually announced, the Interior Ministry announced that they were going to bring over imams to help with the polygamous families. The they have polygamous Muslims practicing polygamy in Germany, and I don't know, somehow these imams specialize in dealing with the issues related to that or something. But anyway, they were very proud of getting these guys over there. And in Britain,
No, they. I mean,
yeah, they
the
tolerate the
Dawa,
same thing.
the Dawa guys openly talk about polygamy and having second wives and stuff. I mean, their discussions are about whether you have to tell your wives. Say, hey, you get these wives, and some of them don't want you to have a second wife. So, do you have to tell them no? So you got your wife over here, your other wife over here, your other wife over here, your other wife over there. You get married. You don't have to marry them in any way that the government is aware of. You get your marriage at the mosque. And as far as the government is concerned, your wives are all single mothers, so they all get state benefits.
Hmm.
And I
So,
remember I remember seeing this. I remember seeing this years ago, like probably 15 years ago, about how in the Muslim world it's pretty difficult. It's pretty difficult for a regular Muslim to have three or four wives because you have to be able to pay for all their residences and so on. So it's something that only wealthy people can do. But there's actually, it was part of the push. It was part of the push. It was part of the incentive. Guys, if you just get to Europe, if you can just get to Europe, any of you regular, ordinary Muslims who could never afford second, third, fourth wife, if you just get to Europe, the governments will pay for your second, third, fourth wife. The governments will pay them because you're not doing it in front of the government. The government thinks they're single mothers. And so, guys, just get to Europe and you can have all the extra wives you want, thanks to Europe.
you know what's incredible though is that these guys think they can do this, and their wives aren't going to notice. I mean, Muhammad had a schedule, right? According to
Mm-hmm.
the Hadith and Sirah literature, he would go from one wife to the other night after night, or sometimes he would visit them all
Mm-hmm.
in the same night, and this was some incredible demonstration of his supermanhood. But the fact is, if he's got a schedule, they know where he is. That's why Haifa, Aisha and Hafsa got mad at him
Mm-hmm.
in Surah 66 because he was out of turn going to see Maria the Copt when it wasn't her turn. And so how do these Dawa guys think they're going to get away with making their wives not letting their wives know that they have other wives when Muhammad himself wasn't even able to get away with that?
Um, well, Muhammad Hijab said you could flat out lie to your wife. So you could say, "Hey, every Monday and Thursday and Saturday, I've got a big project that I need to work on indefinitely, so I won't be here."
And where did he get the idea that he could lie to his wife?
Uh, Muhammad,
There you go
Muhammad
again.
in the Hadith about things that you're allowed to lie about.
That's it. Yeah, that's something that Western authorities would do well to ponder because Muhammad says you can lie to your wife and you lied during wartime. And yet, all the international media and the United Nations and the United States government, they're all taking the Hamas figures of casualties in Gaza at face value, even though Hamas just revised them down by about 12,000. Uh, Nonetheless, they know who would be more honest with us than Hamas.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, speaking of the Biden administration, David, they're spending $3,500,000,000 to supercharge mass migration from the Middle East, according to Senator Eric Schmidt of Missouri. What could possibly go wrong?
Nothing.
That's right. It's a religion of
I'm sure.
peace.
I'm sure we'll get the best and brightest,
Yes,
and
indeed.
our society will be significantly improved, as is every place where Islam goes.
Indeed. You can just look at the history of the Islamic world. And so we have a lot to look forward to, and we can be grateful for that. And on that burst of good feeling, we will conclude this week. But unfortunately, there's likely to be some misunderstanding of Islam between now and next week. And so I'm still not scheduled to go to UCLA for a couple weeks. So we should be able to get next week in. Until then, pray, hope, and don't worry.